Winter is the best season for drawing and painting. The sun goes down at 4:53 today, and I have to perpetually trick my brain into thinking that it is still time to stay awake. It's cold, it's windy, and I am stuck inside. But fortunately, I like the inside. I like my studio, the fireplace upstairs, my family, tea and coffee, and hot chocolate. I love curling up wherever it is and reading, drawing, or working on a story. The season was made for artists. We don't have to make any excuses about why we don't want to go outside or see the sun. We can simply hang out and draw and make some new things. Welcome to the session. I'm continuing to work on some of the Inktober stuff from the end of Inktober 2023. This one, if I'm not mistaken, is Bounce. This piece in particular continues on from the piece prior where Andorra discovered the giant toad, or I think it was a toad, not a frog, beneath the surface in this underground world. And so, of course, like any well-meaning child, she decided she needs to ride the thing. So she's hopping on its back and she bounces because, of course, the surface of amphibians is quite bouncy. And the creature is looking up at her. This was a fun drawing to work on. Poses are a little difficult for me, and I had to do a couple renditions, and this didn't turn out perfectly, but it turned out well enough for what it is. I enjoyed this piece. In particular, I liked working on the background and these like trash heaps that are sitting there. But Inktober in general was a fun experience for me, and I know I've talked about it a lot, but it's been a wonderful thing, and exploring this little character has been a fun journey. I talked to my daughter yesterday morning, and she's getting very close to learning how to read right now at 4.5. We're going through tiny little chapter books where I read things to her, and I ask her what some of the words are, and she can sound them out pretty decently. She's working on these little books called Bob books with my wife that are basically books that teach you how to learn how to read. And she is really excited about the potential for me bringing this story to life, for me to create my own little children's book, just like the ones that she reads. In fact, Andorra in how I draw her here is partially inspired by one of my daughter's books. The book is called Julia's House for Lost Creatures, and it's by Ben Hatke. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's a series of 3 books, but I think the first one is the best, and the illustration style is lovely. I studied it for a while to figure out how he makes things look the way that he does, and then kind of altered some of them and decided to draw this little character for myself. Some of her pieces, some of the way that I put her together comes from Julia herself, but it's altered. I tried to change things a little bit, and things just seemed to change naturally as I worked from the character. And this is pretty common, right? When we want to work on our own version of a thing, we look at the things that we love, we study them, and we try to understand why they work. And that was really my goal in studying from how Ben put his work together in Julia's books. Understanding how the expressions are described, how the character's movement is illustrated. And I've got a long way to go to learn how to do it anywhere near as well as he does, but fortunately his work existed as an inspiration for my own. And I'm sure if I am fortunate enough to bring this story to life in a children's book, that I will find a way to contact that fellow and say, hey, thank you, thanks for showing me that this could be done, and thank you for giving me a style to look toward when it comes to bringing these things to life. Inspirations are important, and they are very, very different from motivation. We tend to kind of group the two together sometimes, but inspirations are an important thing, and I think they're one of the only really beneficial things from Instagram. We can destroy our sense of self-worth by looking at too many things for too long and just realizing that there are artists out there that are far, far, far better than us. But we can also find things that are inspiring, things that are interesting, and tell us what can be done. We spend a lot of time in our own heads dealing with what can't be done, but watching other artists' work can sometimes tell you what can be done. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens with this. And if you have small children, I would encourage you to check out Julia's House for Lost Creatures. It's a wonderful book. It's really exciting and kind of a little goofy. And there's illustrations of trolls and mermaids and little creatures of all kinds. So I would highly encourage you to check it out if you have kids. I love the book. And so does my daughter. Getting back to the seasons, though, in all honesty, the seasonal changes are great for us as humans and artists. Maybe my equatorial friends will disagree, but I think it benefits us that each season is so different from the others. This is the tired season, the inside season, the time to sit back and work on things that don't require light or highly social events, which I of course love. This is the season for reading and drawing, and I love both of those things. Do y'all draw in a corner somewhere, or just take your iPad or sketchbook into the living room? I find that younger people might have a tendency to just draw wherever. I mean, I did when I was young. I could sit like a bird in the corner of the couch for an hour without one of my legs giving out and falling to the floor. As I've gotten older, falling just kind of happens sometimes, unfortunately. At our old house, we had carpet on the stairs, and every once in a while, I would just misstep and I would slide down the whole stairs and sit in a crumpled mess at the bottom of them. Generally, my wife, if she was home, would rush out and make sure I was okay, but I would just kind of sit there in a heap at the bottom and think for a moment, and try to like go through all of my limbs and think, are they all still attached? Do any of them feel broken? It's just something that happens. When I was a kid, I would fall down the stairs if I did, and it would just be, whatever, get stuck in a trampoline, fall off a roof. But goodness, in my 30s, falling like that would have some really terrible consequences. But I run into the fact that younger artists tend to work anywhere. And I did. I took my sketchbooks wherever I went. I remember drawing on airplanes, drawing in the car, drawing in national parks, drawing on airplanes, just like wherever I was. I took my sketchbook and I drew things. I would draw in the living room. I would draw at my friend's basement. I would draw while I was eating. Although I never really got like any food on my sketchbooks because that would have really driven me nuts. But now I tend to draw in like two places. I draw at a desk or at a table. And I mean that quite literally in that I draw at the desk in my studio or I draw at the dining room table upstairs. The reason I said it the way I did is because when we travel, I tend to find a desk or a table and isolate it, so it's not always the same desk or table, but I tend to work in only those kinds of locations. And I do work almost every single day on my art, even when I travel, but I don't work on couches very much anymore. The posture hurts my shoulders, and maybe I just don't like the inconsistency. I like to do things the same way all the time. But I'm curious about y'all, because I think that you listening have a good chance of being much younger than me, and probably not a terribly high chance of being much older than me. So I would wager that you guys probably are mostly younger than I am. And I'm curious, where do you draw? I would love to hear about it in the comments. Do you draw just anywhere, or do you have the same place that you tend to work every single time you do? Thinking a little bit more about winter, I've been rummaging around in my mind trying to figure out why some songs seem to feel like cold weather songs to me. I have a playlist on my phone that's just titled Winter Playlist. And it's got some songs that, for me, just seem to be cold weather music. I don't really know why. It's a struggle. I've tried several times to explain to people why I think I've put the songs in there that I have. There's certain chord structures. There's a lot of staccato kind of playing, lots of high syncopation. There's something about them that just feels cold. I don't know why. In fact, one of the songs on there is called The Drama Summer by The Starting Line, and it is certainly a song about summer, but it mentions winter once, but something about the song feels cold. It's an acoustic song by a pop-punk band, and it's just vocals and acoustic guitar, and something about it feels very cold to me. And I don't know, do you guys have playlists that are specific like that? Playlists that are specific to certain types of seasons or moods or years or things like that? I tend to just listen to whole albums because, again, I'm old. But I do have this winter playlist, and it's really intriguing to me. Why do all of these songs feel like they belong in cold weather? I find music is quite important to my art making process. I have spent more time recently, if I'm being honest, working without any music, just sitting in the silence. And I wonder if sometimes that's because I listen to so many things throughout the day now. But most of the time that I work, I listen to some form of music. I find that I benefit dramatically from listening to music that I know very, very well, music that I don't have to pay attention to. I don't sing along with it while I'm drawing. It just doesn't occur to me. It's like background noise. Probably a little bit of the ADHD brain just is happier with things that it knows well and occupy its subconscious in the background. But I don't know, if I'm being honest. So, and the thing that's weird too is that the music that I listen to differs. I will often listen to really heavy metal music, sometimes with screaming and highly syncopated, difficult time signatures, music that's a little bit jarring. And I think that because it's so complicated, my brain just latches onto it. And it's not distracting at all while I work. Whereas almost if it was simpler music, my brain would get distracted by the finite amount of things and try to really latch onto those and understand them. And with heavier music and really intricate music, I'm just able to focus on the thing I'm focusing on. I've been listening to the Lord of the Rings soundtracks, which ought to be no surprise to anyone as well. But they've been interesting because most of the time it serves as background music, and then every once in a while a particular song kicks in and it's like, oh, this is when Saruman gets pulled from Theoden, or this is right as the hobbits enter Shelob's lair, and it immediately pulls me out of what I'm working on. And this is part of the reason why I don't watch movies anymore while I'm working on my art. But as I'm saying this, it occurs to me that it probably is important to consider what kind of art I'm working on at the moment. If I'm working on things like you're watching take place in the background here, where I'm literally just shading in water or covering the background, that requires very little mental power. Those kinds of things I could probably listen to music that is new or watch a movie while I'm working on it. But when I'm thumbnailing, when I'm coming up with new ideas, when I'm trying to solve a problem, I'm more prone to listen to nothing. I'm more prone to listen to music I know really well that just blocks out distractions because I need to concentrate on whatever it is that I'm doing. And that's important. It's just intriguing that I change the music based on whatever my need is in the moment. And I wonder if you guys do too. If you find that you're easily distracted by music or you're easily distracted by what you're watching when you're working on your art, maybe try shifting it up a little bit. Try only listening to music that you know really well when it comes time for you to focus. Maybe try listening to nothing. I know this was anathema to a lot of my students that I recommended this to back in the day, but maybe try listening to nothing sometimes while you're working and see if you're actually more productive. This reminds me of something that came up on the Draftsman podcast a couple years ago when Stan Prokopenko and Marshall Vandriff were talking, and they both seemed really incredulous that anyone could listen to music or a podcast or anything while effectively working on their artwork. In fact, they had an art podcast that a lot of people listened to, myself included, while we worked on art. But when they heard this, they were really surprised. Both of them seemed to think that there was no way that you could actually listen to a podcast adequately and work on your artwork proficiently as well. I thought about that because, of course, my off-the-cuff response would be, well, you guys are just, you're wrong or you're old. But Stan's not that old, and I trust Marshall in a lot of ways. And so I tried it a couple times, and I have to admit that when you listen to nothing, when you give yourself silence and you just focus on your artwork, it is an entirely different experience. And one that sometimes is a much better experience than the other. I like listening to music, but I've also tried not listening to anything and just letting myself work on the process and on the project. And this is certainly more beneficial with things that are more experimental, things that I have to think about. But art's a long process. It's a long thing. And if you were to never allow yourself to listen to music and you're putting in 20 hours a week into your artwork, that's going to make it a little bit more difficult. Well, thank you for listening today. I know this is a little bit of an abrupt end, but it's been a little bit longer than normal, and I've gone over a lot of categories, some of which were a little bit disparate. But I hope you gained something from it, if even that was just some company and a voice while you were working on your own artwork, contemplating whether you should be working on your own artwork or if you should turn this off and just work on your work by itself. Well, thank you for your time either way. I appreciate you and your comments. I appreciate the time that you offered to me, and I just hope that this is bringing some benefit to you and your artistic life. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.